Hey, Twitch caught on. Okay, so we're streaming. We're gonna go ahead and tell everybody that we're streaming. Streaming game dev. Not 100% sure what I'll work on. There we go. And then we'll just post that somewhere else as well. So, I've got my heater on in the background because I live under the thumb of a slum lady at the moment. But I'm not 100% sure that the heater is compatible with a computer at full load. We'll find out. It won't blow out the house mains or anything, but you may hear my battery backup start to shriek. We will see. But if you hear noise coming on intermittently, it's because I'm making up the 10 degrees of temperature between what my landlady is willing to do and what room temperature is. Of course, she's paying for the utilities either way, so... Oh well. That said, we are now going to try and get some stuff done. Now, I took off my headset because I'm just so used to taking it off. Not even really a headset, just headphones. But there are sounds in the game now. The popcorn sounds are still here because I couldn't think of any other kind of sound I'd prefer to hear. But since I do have a few viewers, let me know how loud this is on your end once I run into some of these debris. Because on my end, it doesn't sound too loud at all. But if it's loud on your end, I'll adjust the sound. And now my heater's on, and I was running the game, and I was streaming, so I guess we're fine. No loud beeping. So, what do I want to polish today? Well, right now what we have is a ship that can have these elements get ripped up. What I'd like to do is create the debris field, because this is not what you're supposed to see. What you're supposed to get is a full debris field. Excuse me, a full debris field, and that consists of a couple basic parts. And the other parts are more or less done. I have to redo the engine, but basically there are the ship parts, where these external ship elements get carved apart. That's what you see here. Then there are the core parts, which I might not get to do just yet. But basically, when your ship gets ripped open, there are going to be holes in the ship that you can go in that are considerably deeper than those elements that you just saw outside, and then you'd be inside the ship looking at interior debris. Those require larger parts that can get cut open, and I've modeled a couple of those and I know how to do it, but I don't know if I want to do that today. And the other thing we're going to need is scattered debris elements, which are just hull elements with debris attached. And those are real fast, so that's what we're going to do next. And then the last thing we need are debris islands, which are going to be things like engines that get ripped off and sent flying aside. But for the debris islands, all we really need to do is grab a hull plate and bring it out into the game world as its own thing, and then set up some debris stuff coming off of it. Floating debris. Guide. So the key to this is that only one of these two sides actually has debris on it. The other side is flat, and that is to help guide the player, because they're going to see the debris and they're going to see the flat side, and they're going to have fun, figuring that out. So what we're going to do is we're going to decorate one of these sides with some debris. That's the Moments Recorder. I need the destroyed parts, maybe? Or debris casters. Is a debris caster element, is this a grid? No, it's not a grid. So where's the grid? Panels, debris, here we are. We've got an injector and a projector. That looks right. It's definitely not the right size, but I can fix that. We'll just drop it into the floating debris guide. And then line it up with the proper scaling and everything. Perfect. Now, I think that it's using the old panel depositor script, or is this the new or the old one? I think, let's just check. This is the injector, and here's the projector. So the projector is using the panel depositor, and the injector is also using the panel depositor. So I think that it's just... yeah, there's no substantial difference here. Yeah, so it doesn't really matter which one I use, and the larger one is going to fit into our needs a little bit better. So you can see by the red box, that's where the debris gets cast, and that's the wrong way. So what we're going to do is we're going to flip the interior mesh 180 degrees like this. And then what we'll do is we'll just move it a notch. Like that. And now it's lined up properly with what we'd like. But we'd also like that debris to be a lot more aggressive. So we're going to add in a couple more pieces of paneling just to get it to feel right. Like this. And now we can just drop this anywhere we'd like on the mesh. For example, here. And it doesn't quite look right. I can either layer it or make it bigger. Let's go ahead and make it a little bit bigger. We'll just go for 1.2, 1.2, 1.2. It's still a little bit loose, but that's fine. I don't think anybody will notice. So we're going to duplicate that, move it over here, and flip it. And then we'll duplicate it again and put it in the middle. And then we'll duplicate it. Notice that what I'm doing here is I'm creating a channel. This has an unusual shape to it on purpose, and this will be a nice channel that will lure the player in. We're going to put in another debris caster here to fill it with small debris, and then we can use this channel as a lure. This flat surface is also going to be a nice flat area, but we still have to finish up with filling this area in, and that means that we're going to flip here. Now it's a little too large, so what we're going to do is we're going to reduce the size down to 1s and move it so that it doesn't actually cause any debris problems. You can see there is a phantom collider in play here. This is something that I'll probably want to fix. But basically, this collider has a box collider, so we can edit the box collider. And pull that part back if we can touch it. All right, well, we'll just go ahead and manually. It's not Y. Well, Y also needs adjusting, so we'll make Y 9 and X 9. There we are. It's not perfect. We'll adjust it later. Is this negative 0.25? Something like that, right? Whatever. But then we'll just duplicate it and bring it down and flip it again. Now this box area is technically a place that the player could go, but it's going to be full of debris just as soon as I plug in another debris element here. Just drop it in and set it up. So when we come up with this, we just need to remember which side is the broadcast side. The old system used to have a nice visual for that, but for some reason I got rid of the visual when I changed to this new mechanic. Let me just go in and fix up the debris draw for this. I'm not sure that this is actually the right script. This might be an obsolete... I think this is the obsolete one. Let's go ahead and find the correct one. We'll pull in a prefab that exists. Actually, we'll just turn it on. It's already pulled in. Yeah. So that is a really, really obsolete one. These are, sorry, the one I was just clicking on. Prefabs, destroyed parts. No, panels here. Debris system. Obsolete. Because this yellow one is the one we actually want. If I can get it. That's a debris buoy. That's not what we want. A debris grid projector. Is that it? No, it's debris caster. There it is. And we'll drop this debris caster into our new friend. Maneuver it into place. Doop, 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 doop. And then we'll just set it up correctly. So flip it and move it. And it's a little bit short, so we'll just make it a little taller. Now this is kind of inside the object. We're going to want to have two sets of these. The good news is the total particle count is what matters, not the size of the specific object in question. So this will be dense in terms of having a fairly large number of debris. 10,000 is probably too many for this particular instance, but 5,000 is good. And then we'll just duplicate this, and we will scale it up rather substantially. And we will go ahead and put in a higher scatter value and just try and give it a really big splash zone. The scale, min and max scale, I'm not actually sure whether those are going to be good or bad. Let's go over and investigate and see how they look. So if we save and press play, we'll be able to actually see this debris element that we've just created. There it is. So you can see that the debris I put inside are much, much too small relative to the rest of the debris. So for the floating debris, that might be the right size, but even then it feels a little small. So we're going to go ahead and up it to 0.1 to 0.2 for the floating debris, and then the caged debris, we're going to make it 0.3 to 0.5. Ooh, that's big. I think it might be too much. I might have made it too big. Also, that turning has a weird snap to it. I don't know if you noticed that. Feels really quite strange. So I might have to change how it moves the camera when the ship snaps to a location. It's pretty aggressive. It doesn't feel quite right. And we should be able to bounce off of this stuff, or rather, it should be able to bounce off of us, but... Ah, there, good. But when it's too big, that particular kind of debris doesn't bounce right. So even this is probably too big. Let's go ahead and bring it down another notch. And that means that the floating debris can be 0.08 to 0.15. All right, now this should be something that is vaguely passable. The floating debris might now be a little too small on the inside, but I think it passes. So the problem is the interior here. The debris is my bad. Let's put in a collider. Sorry, I suddenly got the coughs. All right. Now I can make it a convex collider, but then we will have some problems with bumping off of various tiny parts of it, so we're going to leave it as concave. Oof. Suddenly my throat got really, really scratchy. So I've been sick for a week or two now with the holiday flu, or holiday cold. So you can see how this is a channel that we can go down, but we have a problem, and that is that our front-facing debris here, this panel that I'm pointing at, doesn't seem to actually be casting any debris. And that could be because the debris isn't showing, or it could be because there's no debris there. So let's take a oh, God damn it. Let's take a closer look. So this is what should be casting the debris. But it only cast one... Oh, I'm just an idiot. So what I did here is I accidentally copied only part of the debris grid injector. I I didn't copy the whole thing. So we're going to want to actually copy things when we're trying to copy things, and not just randomly copy a visual and not the rest of the object. The other thing I'm thinking is that it might be better if we actually close this off instead of trying to fill it with debris. So we'll just pull this up and make this a wall that the player is going to have a hard time getting through if they want to try and get through at all. And we'll just reduce this down to like a 1 or a 2. And we're going to turn off contained for the other ones, because contained keeps it locked more closely to the surface, whereas it should be more free, to create a real splash of debris if we decontain it. Yeah, this is what I want it to look like. Just a mess that the player wants to avoid. That's good. We have this this interior debris caster here. I think that we're going to want to move that to cast from the side instead, to complete our attempt to have a to have it be like an island, a proper island. So the player should feel like they want to go across the top or through the chute, but they shouldn't want to try and fuss with this over here or over here. We're creating a channel system, as you can see. So that's what we're doing right now. We're just going to go ahead and create a splash of colliders in here. And let's take a look. That is a little bit more aggressive than I was expecting. We'll have to take a closer look and see where that went awry. So we have a bunch of loose debris. When I take the debris out of the middle, it becomes a little bit too clean. So I might have debris in the middle and on the side. But here on the side, where I had intended to create a nice field of debris, it ended up going radically further than I thought. And I think that's just because I wasn't looking right. Okay. So I was actually weighing it against this red bar, thinking the red bar was where the wall ended, but that's not true. The red is way past the wall, so this is more like what I want. But we also need to duplicate that and bring it back over here, and we're going to want to fill this area with debris. Again, I defilled it, time to refill it. And this whole thing is less than 20,000 debris elements, so it's not too bad. Debris caster 2, we're going to extend the range, Z. There we are. And should I punch this up to 10,000? That's a lot. We'll see. I mean, it's not a lot, but it's plenty. It may be too many. Alright, so now you can see that this looks like just a really, really ragged floating piece of trash, and you really don't want to fuss with it. And what we have here is a channel that is relatively clear, but although it's fairly obvious, it's not going to be something that you always notice right away. But you can just push through here without any difficulty. Now I think you'll notice there's some popping, some visual popping. That is an artifact of certain other objects that are in the scene that don't have the right shaders set up. So for now, what we're going to do is we're going to turn this entire ship off. And the reason for that is because it is what has those objects. We shouldn't see any popping now that we've turned off all of the errant materials, but let's find out. If we still see popping, I'm going to need to figure out what's causing it. Oh, no popping. I was right. It's that errant material that I'm using for the rescue boys, the debris boys. Oh, gee, that's confusing. I'll have to think about that. The debris boys are what you want. They actually have like stuff that you want to grab, but they are a little bit error prone at the moment because I need a custom unlit shader, and I don't have one built. So as you can see from this side, there's not a whole lot of debris, but there is some. And I'm not sure whose debris that is, but I need to fix it because that's not good. I want this side to be basically clean. If I take a look, it is from debris grid injector. Why are you injecting that way? Hold on. If I pull you out. It looks like it's injecting the wrong way. Which is kind of odd. These other guys, all went the correct way, but this one, well, it did both. It went the correct way and it went the wrong way. Is that because I told them they're not contained anymore? What if I turn that containment back on? Will that help? Ah, here we are. By the way, I presume everybody can hear me. If you can't hear me, oh, oops. So with containment on, the debris scatter isn't as aggressive, but there's no weird pop through. So there's a flaw in my containment protocol. Let's go ahead and fix the containment protocol because I want it to be uncontained, but I also need to make sure that it's not going to be just firing past the z-axis limits. So just pop this up and take a look. The Moon is a Cheese says he can hear me fine. That's good. Also, hi. Hello. So we're going to pop this open, and what we have is a non-contained set. We have a set of things that cares whether or not it's contained. So we're just going to go ahead and find references to this. And it should only be within this file. So we've got here noise offset. If it is contained, then we offset this. If it's not contained, then we're offsetting by a fair amount here. We're going to go ahead and make this a 0 because I believe that X is actually the axis in question. We're going to go ahead and see whether that fixes our problem. Since it happened on virtually every one of our panels before, should be pretty clear pretty immediately whether or not it's fixed. I don't think it is. Yep, that's not fixed. So it wasn't that. Here we can see that if it's contained, then we have a noise value here. I think that the problem is that our noise value is getting really high. And so what's happening is that we are finding a noise offset for that noise level. Here it is. Well, no, that's what we fixed last time, and it didn't fix it. I mean, I'm pretty sure that it's the x-axis. I'm like 95% sure, because the noise times 5 is a tremendous push, and it's pushing it downstream. So what we're getting here is a tremendous offset in the wrong direction. So I need to figure out what that is. When I removed the offset there, yeah, I don't see any chance of it having any other x-axis components that are negative. Here's the computation in question. If it's uncontained, then the local position equals the offset. What's the offset? Oh, the offset is just to center it. I mean, it hinges at the edge, so the offset moves it. But that's not a big factor here. Vector3.right times x plus intact panels wide plus damaged panels wide. Those are all positive. So that should be a vector3 right that's positive. Vector3 up is not a factor here. Random valued vector3 forward times 5 is not a factor here. Noise offset noise is the only factor I can see that might be moving them negative. But when I changed it so that it had no ability to have a negative value here, it really didn't help. Let's go ahead and put in a positive value minimum instead. Now look, we're still getting floating debris on the wrong side. All right, so that is not a factor. It's not even less of them. It's just not a factor at all because there's the same number of them. If we look at the local position, we can see that the x is -6. Yeah, so something is making these x coordinates very negative. And it's not the noise value, because if the noise value was doing it, then changing these would work. It is not working. So there is some reason that these x-axis values are becoming negative. It is definitely in this floating panels section. So let's go ahead and just say it here. Debug.log, or if n.localPosition.x is less than 0, then n.localPosition.x equals 0. Let's just see whether or not that actually matters. Oh, I can't. New vector 3, 0 or negative n.localPosition.x, n.localPosition.y, n.localPosition.z. I'm gonna just, oh, no? What's going on here? Cannot modify type of local position. Cannot implicitly convert. Oh. Just me being dumb. As usual. So I've just hard-coded it to bounce them off the 0 axis if I hit the 0 axis. And you can see that it did not help at all. Did it? No, wait, it did. It helped. I can't tell. It didn't clean it up. It may or may not be. Are these actually in the second tier? Let's go ahead and just see if they're here. Why don't we turn off the tiers just for now? So if we get down to here, we can just return. So I've turned off the most aggressively bounced elements, and you can see that they're gone. So it's definitely happening in this group. Something here is causing these panels to rotate. But for some reason, they're ending up in a local position of -x. But they shouldn't be able to be in a local position of -x, because I bounced them. All I can think of is that maybe the local rotation is somehow screwing up the local. Oh, here it is. If raycast for bounces, local bounce n. This is the problem. So the problem with this is that I was telling it to raycast for bounces, and it was raycasting, and it was figuring out that it was bouncing off of presumably itself. That's a sensitive operation, and I shouldn't be using it in this particular case. It's gone. But I also have a problem. I don't actually see much in the way of a plating. I'm not actually sure we have enough plates here. See how this debris grid injector only has like 8. So there's something screwy going on, because they should have like 50 each, not 8. So there's something screwing up our wonderful debris grid injector broadcasts, and it's causing them to fail. So the only thing that causes them to fail, in theory, is if they come up as a null value here in the set. And there are null values there. But the chance of accidentally rolling those null values more than half the time is extraordinarily low. So why are these producing so few results? I mean, this is only 10 or so results. That's no good. So we're going to go ahead and spawn. And once again, we're only getting like 10 results. So we're going to turn on debug. Oh, this doesn't have a debug option. Okay, well, we're going to do that in a minute. For now, however, we're just going to go ahead and manually spawn this stuff. So you can see that what we've got here is only a few pieces of debris. Not very many at all. Let's go ahead and create a debug toggle and then tell it to debug. Are we still on? We're still in debug view. There, normal view, please. So public void debug, public bool debug, public bool debug. And did we set up the exempt child here? Oh, the exempt child happens automatically. That's fine then. So if we turn the debug on, what we can do is we can have a bunch of if debug then statements. So here in our Y panel, what we're going to do is just put in debugs with every single panel that we build. So if debug, then console.log, no, debug.log, my bad. Name plus tight panels plus n dot local position. And then we will just repeat the process here. Oh, come on. There we are. So what we've just done is we've added in a bunch of attempts to debug that. But what we're also going to want to do is just check and see whether Y ever changes. I don't think it ever does. If I mistyped something, that would explain this. No. So then we'll just put it in here. If debug, debug.log, beginning name plus deploying panel column Y. And let's see what it has to say for itself when I have debug turned on here. So you can see that now it worked fine. I added in some debug statements and now it works. That is what we in the industry call serious bullshit. So I'm not sure what happened. It may have been, let's see whether or not it's actually fixed. Yeah, it looks fixed. Okay. Magic. Erdroy says hello. Sorry if I hadn't seen you. I was in the middle of debugging and I wasn't looking very much at the surface, at the chat. So here you can see our setup. I've got to make that turn feel better. But you can see that what we've got here is a really, really flat setup for the top of our element. And that's on purpose because what we actually want to do is use this element to build racetracks for the player. So what we're going to do is we're going to save this floating debris guide as a prefab. There we go. And then we can just duplicate it and move it until we have a good set of like racing areas, right? So for example, I could do that and then I could duplicate it and bring it down and over here like this. And then I could duplicate it again. Now let's go ahead and just keep massaging this position. It's not really a great position right now. Duplicate it one more time for here, and then bring it over here. And I'm keeping my eye on the debris fields that are coming off the side as well, because those are a point, a value here. And then we'll redo this, just create one more and move it so that the last field has a channel arranged properly for us to fly through. Like this. And then we'll just duplicate that and create a block, a hard barrier that drives us down into the channel. I ended up rotating it wrong, and I can't see the rotation widget with all of my crap that I've put on the screen. There you are. So, with this sort of setup, let's take a look at our performance. Okay, we're at 70 right now, so that's not bad. And you can see that what we have here is we're trying to get a feel for whether or not you can build like a race course sort of situation where the player feels like they're being lured down a specific path. And I think we can. I don't think there's any difficulty here. We're at an unstable 60, which isn't too bad, but it's also not too great. Drop down to 50 there. So we are seeing some performance loss here with this much debris. We could adjust the amount of debris that's in these fields pretty easily. So if we take a look at these debris grid injectors, those are fine. These debris casters are probably the ones that are really taking a lot of the particle counts too high. So we'll drop this one down to 5,000, and then we'll drop the other two down to maybe 3,000 each. And we'll just see whether or not that helps us. All right. We're definitely faster. You can see a little bit of LOD popping, but it's not too bad. And then you can see that we're kind of being pulled down this trench run, right? So the idea is that at the end of that trench run, we'd have something cool. We never dropped below 50 that time, but we did have still an unstable 60. There are still a couple of optimizations left, but at this point, if I'm dropping down slow, I have to be real careful because I don't have any more mega savings like I did with GPU instancing. At this point, any optimizations I do are going to be nitpicky. You can see them LODing into position there. I think that's fine. All right. So now the big test is our big ship. Let's turn this ship back on. Kaboom. That's not the ship. That is, in fact, a hopelessly obsolete object. So we're going to call this ship. Turn it back on and move this ship into a position where we come out of the debris channel and right into the ship. Yeah, like that. And we're going to get some popping here just due to the nature of a material. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually just change that material right now. There's no reason for us to keep using that damaged material. Is it the highlight? No, no. One of these materials is incorrect now. Is there a glow material that I'm not seeing here? Glow, there it is. No, that glow material is a chord shader. It's probably in the other. It's probably in this part here. You know what? Let's go find it by actually looking up the thing we're looking to get here. We've got a debris buoy. Here it is. And the material involved, prox debris, prox hull, and glow. Those are all... Oh, this one just has the wrong... I'm just a friggin' idiot. Okay. So, yeah, I was just being an idiot. So now we shouldn't have any popping. We'll see. So the idea here is that this ship should be something that we can sort of see, but we don't really want to go over and look at directly. So what we're going to do is we're going to create another copy of this floating debris guide and wall off the ship. So now you can sort of see, it's a little high. Let's pull it down just a touch. Grind, grind, grind. Yep. So now you can sort of see how this debris system really does change depending on your field of vision. And that's kind of the whole point. This is a game about playing with fields of vision. It's a game about trying to figure out how to guide the player gently. I really hope you guys can't hear those coughs too bad, because I keep trying to turn away and cover my mouth, but this is a decent mic, and they might be blasting straight into your ears. Our FPS is very bad. So obviously including the whole ship at the same time is not as time-savvy or price-savvy as I had hoped. We are seeing some serious slowdown, and we're going to have to deal with that. We're still getting slowdown even now, which is a little strange because nearly all of the debris systems are off our screen. Which means they shouldn't be rendering. It's only now that we climb back up to our full speed, and that's kind of strange. That's not the performance I expected. Yeah, I definitely have to fix this turn so it feels a little bit more natural. So there, you can see that we're getting a pretty bad performance at this stage. We're only getting 40 frames, 30 frames a second here, and my machine is pretty strong. So that's probably going to bog down anybody else who tries to play it unless I've got a real beast. But what surprises me is that the culling doesn't seem to actually be helping much. Let's take a look and see whether or not these particle fields are culling properly. If we take a look at this debris caster here, it is not visible on camera, which means it shouldn't be rendering, and that should be saving us quite a lot. We could be losing out because of these panels. These panels might just be, they might be as expensive as I was worried they were going to be. Let's go ahead and turn off all of the panel systems just temporarily. And then what we'll do is we'll see how our performance improves. Because if the panels are the problem, that is one of the last big optimizations that I have up my sleeve. So it looks like the panels were the problem. So the reason that the panels are such a big issue is because those panels are game objects and not my optimized virtual particles. So I can turn them into my optimized virtual particles, and I've been leaving a trail of breadcrumbs. Okay, so we're having the flicker problems. I need to figure out what that is. But no, we're still getting pretty poor performance. It's not as bad, but it's still pretty bad. So it looks like it's more than just that. What we can do is we can turn on our rendering pipeline helper and see what's causing the slowdown. But I have a feeling it's just that we're drawing 100,000 particles to the screen, 100,000 meshes. You see that pop in? That's a little bit rough. That's fine though. We can polish that stuff later on. So we're fine in here, but when we turn down towards the ship and we get close to the ship, our FPS suddenly drops radically, and you can see that we're down at 40 now. So let's go ahead and see what's causing that problem. We're going to take a look at our frame debugger, and we will click Enable. There we are. So this is the frame debugger, and if you've never seen this before, it's kind of a fun thing to have happen. But the problem with the frame debugger is that it doesn't tell us exactly how long these frame elements took to render. They just let us try and debug to see whether or not we've got any issues. So here's where we start to come in with our debris elements. Well, that might be one of the issues. The debris grid's not GPU instanced. Well, we can fix that. So here you can see that these batch quite nicely. Let's go ahead and turn on GPU instancing for the debris. I can't imagine that that's going to be much help, but we'll give it a shot. The hull shader. It shouldn't even be the hull shader. It should be the prox hull shader, shouldn't it? That might be the issue. Well, we'll turn on instancing anyway. If that's faster, I'll be shocked. It seems to be faster. We'll know for sure in a minute, though. Yeah, it's noticeably faster. Still not fast enough, but it gave us a couple, like five or so frames. Let's go ahead and turn on that frame debugger again and see what the heck's up. So this is a fairly slow frame, and if we take a look, rendering the ship is not the problem, or it would always be a problem. Here we go. So here we have a set of elements. These are not drawing very many. It may simply be that these particle fields are so wide that the most extreme little patches are ending up on our screen. Because look at this. This one only draws like 4 particles, but it's an entire 1,000 instance call. So there are 996 meshes being drawn that you can't see here. It's not really very optimized. And here's another one, just like scattered at the edge of our field of vision. Yeah, all of these are just tiny pieces. This one's the first one that I feel has some merit. Yeah, so most of these need a little bit of tweaking. It's pretty clear that we're rendering at times when only a couple of particles are visible. It might be something that we should dump to the end of the frame. Like, if you're not really very visible, add the pieces of your add the particles that are visible to a final render queue, and then at the very end of the frame, we'll just do a final render of all of that crap. Because that way, if you have 4 or 5 pieces, then those will just get rendered separately. We can do that pretty simply by using the center point of the object being rendered and testing whether or not it's within the culling screen of the camera. But testing that for 1,000 objects or 10,000 objects is actually a little bit pricey. I might have to try and optimize that. And these things being rendered, I can't even see. Oh, there they are in the background. That's fine. Okay, so you really can see like hundreds of particle fields, and I think that's just the problem. You can see too many particle fields. I could cull them more aggressively because they're LOD'd, but they're not LOD'd. They're LOD'd with the assumption that you're going to be coming in from far away with a clean field of vision. It's something where I could change it so that they don't have a clean, so that you can set whether or not they have a clean field of vision or not, and change how that works. So here we got some shadow casting, and these are oh, is this the problem? Because those were my this was my shader here. Those yellow things, those are mine. I actually caused these to happen, but there's not a lot of them. And I don't know how long it takes. It doesn't tell you how long this shit takes, as far as I know. It just tells you that it happened. A crap ton of render lights. These are the buoys that I was talking about. So all of these are being drawn like off screen, in the depths of the screen, where you can't see them. Here are these are mine, and this is the light on the front. Yeah, okay, so all of this is the lighting pass. I actually don't think I'm adding a lot of complexity to this, but there sure are a lot of random draw mesh calls here, and I think those are all because of the buoy. I think I can have the buoy turn off its lights until you are able to see it, if I want. Let me go ahead and just grab a piece of paper, if I can find one. Make a couple of quick notes. Where's my notebook? I used to have one. Don't know where my notebook went, but I found some index cards, so I'll just use them. All right, so what we can do here is buoy light turns off at range or when empty. And particle system aggressively LODs when player is approaching through other debris. I don't think I came up with any other ideas for optimizations that meant anything before that. Although, if you heard me say something and I didn't just repeat it, maybe you should tell me. We're just going to keep going through here, take a couple more looks. So you might be wondering, how are you going to aggressively LOD the particle systems based on whether or not the particle systems are, based on whether the player is near something? Well, the answer to that is that I can just check and see whether or not the player is near to other particle systems. If there are other particle systems within the proximity of the player, I can assume that those particle systems have something to do, they're on the screen, they're in the way, and I can just reduce the, my LOD because there are other particle systems near the player. The problem with that is I've got to actually program it. So that's what we're going to do now. So we've got a whole bunch of particle systems in this scene, and we're just going to pop on into one of them. Debris caster. We still have all the panels turned off. I'll turn those back on now before I forget. But we're also going to want to take a look at this debris scattered. Actually, the base class is what we're going to want to take a look at. Here it is. So what we need is an LOD calculation that's a little bit more aggressive. If we take a look, we do have a current LOD float that we keep track of, and we set that as we do our calculations. Here it is, range value. So what we want to do is we want to determine whether or not the player is near other pieces of debris. So for that, we're going to want to have a static value that we can calculate on the fly. So public static. Do we have a public static camera? New protected camera. Which we set here. We're just going to go ahead and make this a... can we make it a static? Is it okay to have that? Or is it going to barf? Seems fine. So what we'll do is we'll just say that if camera is null, then... There we are. And that way we'll be able to then have another static, public static. Well, let's move this camera static up so that we don't forget what's going on. Public static bool, not even int, player rendered debris, nearby debris. Camera, what do you call it? Camera near, what do you want to call it? It's the number of debris fields that are close to the camera. Debris in camera proximity. We're going to have a public or protected, let's just do static. Static int debris in camera proximity. Static float debris in camera proximity last cached time. And then in here we're going to have a getter. We're going to say that if time.delta time, not even time.delta time, time since loaded, time since level load, here it is. And this is a float, yeah. So if time since level load equals debris in camera proximity cache last time, then return debris in camera proximity. Otherwise, debris in camera proximity equals equals time since level load, and we'll want to calculate it. So for each draw instance base dib in active if dib dot bounds visible. No, I just want to see whether it's being drawn visible on camera. So if it's not visible on the camera, then continue. Oh, we're going to want to debris in camera proximity equals 0, and then down at the bottom we're going to want to do return debris in camera proximity. So if it is visible on the camera, then we are theoretically on the screen, but we may be far away from the camera. So what we're going to want to check is see whether or not we are very close to the camera, or close-ish. So for that, what we're going to do is we're going to say that our bounds, we have a set of bounds here, bounds core and bounds visible. We're going to see whether or not the camera is within those bounds. So if if dib.bounds core dot contains camera dot transform dot position, then debris in camera proximity plus plus. But the question in my mind is, do we also want to count it if there is just other debris? Like, it doesn't even matter if you don't have to be within the debris field, you just have to be kind of near them. So what we're going to do is we are going to say this is plus equals 2, else we're just going to want to check and see if the closest position is near the camera. else if dot magnitude is less than bounds or dib dot bounds Okay, so there's something wrong with this. I screwed it up somehow because it's barf. Well, we'll just go ahead and presume that it's going to get fixed in a second here. Bounds core dot extents dot magnitude times 3, then debris in camera proximity plus plus. There we are. So if you're inside it, we'll count it as 2 pieces of debris, or 2 elements of debris, and otherwise we'll count it as 1. But only if it's nearby. If it's too far away, then we're not going to count it at all. So with that in mind, what we're going to do is go down here to the LOD calculation section, and we're going to want to use those values to change our effective range. So here you can see that what we do is we take delta magnitude divided by core extents magnitude, and then we lerp based on that range value. So in here, we're going to go ahead and say range value plus equals, and then we're going to add in our debris in camera proximity. But this isn't actually what we want to do. What we want to do is multiply by it, because basically this will be between 0 and some arbitrarily large number. Between 0 and 1, it's basically the correct time for what we want to do. But after that, we're going to want to multiply it by substantially more. So here what we're doing is we're going to multiply it by a factor that's between 0 and some incredibly large number. So what we're going to want to do is add 1 to this. But I have a feeling that that's going to screw us up. I have a feeling that all of our particle systems are now going to be... oh, Twitch just got through Elbow Etchy's ad blocker. You are free to block ads on all of my channels. I really don't care about ads at all. I do know that sometimes you have to reboot your browser if the ads come back, just because sometimes ad blocker is temporarily, disabled and screwed up. It happens. So you can see that there's some popping going on. Something in this scene is causing popping, and I don't really know what it is, but our frame rate is pretty bad. Okay, so we're definitely coming in a little bit too hot. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and square this. So debris in camera proximity times debris in camera proximity divided by 10 plus 1. Now, ignoring the shadow popping, we're going to want to see whether or not we get any debris element popping. So it's a little bit hard to tell because sometimes like the whole system will suddenly turn pale like that, and that's not what we're looking for. We're looking for okay, so there is some popping here. The LOD is aggressively popping, and I think the reason for that is because we are moving in and out of debris fields. So what we're going to want to do is have the debris fields in camera proximity not be a simple plus plus or anything like that. So if we're inside it, then increase it by 1. Otherwise, we're going to want to increase it by this magnitude. So we're going to want to get the closest point and the magnitude and then divide it by our magnitude. Except for that's backwards, isn't it? That might work. Let's go ahead and put in a debug.log debris in camera proximity equals debris in camera proximity. There we are. Let's just go ahead and see what that value is at any given time. It's got a barf here. What? Where? Oh, this is supposed to be a float. Yeah, it sounds like you just need to reboot your browser, Albuechi. So you can see that it's currently at 200, which is an extraordinarily high number. It's obviously far too high. We'll go and see more about this in a minute, but we'll never be able to see any of these debris fields if we have values of hundreds, you know. You can see that it's wobbling quite rapidly up and down, which is a little bit unusual. I guess that's because things are coming onto the screen. So what we're going to want to do is have a running average. So float last frame equals debris and camera proximity, or just like float debris and camera proximity equals 0, and then we'll just replace all of these with that. And we'll say debris and camera proximity equals mathf dot float, no, dot lerp, debris and camera proximity, and then time dot delta time. There we go. And that should give us a much slower debris problem. But right now our problem is that this value is just hilariously high. So we're going to go ahead and divide that whole thing by, I don't know, 1,000. And we'll see how that works out for us. So you can see that we're floating at around 1, 1.5, 2. So it's just increasing continuously at this point. It seems like we're hovering at about... Okay, so it's just going up and up and up. That's interesting. So that feels like it's actually about right, in that it should be very high at those points. It's now hovering, so it's not doing too bad. And as we go over the other side, we should see it should start to be fading already. Oh, it is, good. And then it should just be completely gone. So I need to divide by more than 100, basically. And now that we're way out here, we get to see the full debris field glory. And you can see that we're hovering at 40 frames a second, so we might have to adjust some of this stuff. But as we get close, things suddenly drop, and we should get to see a... Okay, so our performance isn't improving very much. I divided it by 1,000, and it still didn't work. Let's go ahead and just... debug.log inside debris field. And then we'll go ahead and dib.parent. Let's see whether or not this is magnitude based or whether it's inside debris field based. So I don't see us complaining that we're inside a debris field, so that's all magnitude based. Let's go ahead and stop and wait for it to stabilize. So it stabilized at about 1.4, which to be honest feels about right. We're getting some more pop in here. We're going to have to try and decide what we want to do about this, because it's a little bit egregious when they're close by. What we might want to do is, instead of using it to multiply the apparent distance, we should really use it to raise the apparent distance to a power or something similar. So we're hovering. It's gonna give us a number. So let's go ahead and just put in a. I didn't see any inside debris field warnings. Did you? Just 1 or 2. So we're gonna go ahead and assume that doesn't happen very often. is generally between 1 and 14, 15-ish. So what we're going to want to do is down here in our range value calculations, you can see that what I'm doing is I'm squaring it, and then I'm dividing it by 10, and I'm adding 1, and I'm making that added onto the distance that we're trying to reach. But that's, I mean, the distance is measured in number of core magnitude steps. So if we've got something that is like 50 by 50 by 50, that's going to be like what, around a 90 magnitude. And so every 90 meters, it's going to go up by 1 unit. So when I then multiply that by something incredibly huge, like 15 times 15 divided by 10, what I end up with is quite a large number. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to make it so that close by things aren't affected, but further away things are. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say that if debris in camera proximity, so if range value is greater than debris in camera proximity. Hold on, that's not right, because if it's larger, I want it to be a smaller value. So if range value is so if the range value is greater than 20 minus debris in camera proximity, so that would mean that if the range value maxes out at about 15. So if we've got a very high range value, then what we're going to want to do is float range clip equals 20 minus debris in camera proximity. And then here we'll do range clip. So what we're going to want to do is trim that edge. So range value, that's not how you spell range value. Range value equals range value minus range clip times 10 plus range clip. And we'll just make it so that that matters more and more as you get further and further away. So what I've said is, if we have a really, really high value for our range clipping, then at a closer and closer proximity, we'll start to do this aggressive clipping. But I'm not actually sure that range value works in the way I think it does. So we're just going to debug.log that range value. And we're just going to go ahead and transform.parent.name range value. Right. We're going to go ahead and get a lot of spam here. So we're going to pause the game immediately and only take 1 frame steps, because otherwise we're going to have a lot of loud chuttering here. And you can see that these range values are as expected. These floating debris guides, this is the closest one. It's right on top of us. But we have some things that are 4 or 5 out, and those are the actual objects on the ship. So that's as expected. And there are some that aren't currently being shown on camera. If we were going to, well, they should all be on camera. So if we take a look down at the bottom, yeah, it doesn't look like they get very high. So I'm not sure this would actually be of much help. I'm going to go ahead and make it a lower value here. 15. That way it'll get down to like 0. And we'll see how this works. So right now, things that are very, very far away are going to get an LOD penalty. But as we start to get closer, we should see that this number climbs. I'm going to make it adapt faster. That's a really slow adaptation. Alright, that's a much faster adaptation. Okay, so I'm seeing some popping, but I think that that's the shadow popping, and not the particle system popping. Our FPS is unchanged. It literally didn't make a single bit of difference. In fact, it might even be slower than it was. Alright, so let's go ahead and just turn this off and see whether or not our frames are still terrible. Because right now we're testing kind of a worst case performance situation, and that would be this. Apparently frame debugging is not interesting because everybody left. That's fine. So it's actually costing us frames to do that calculation. It's, as far as I can tell, not making any difference at all one way or the other. Let's go ahead and make it super aggressive and see whether or not it gets... if we get any frame performance out of it. All of this frame stuff is just a hope, just a general test, just because it's impossible for us to actually perform the exact same maneuver time after time. Here you can see it's definitely having an effect. I made it ridiculous on purpose, and right now we're getting the long LOD versions of all of these. And it isn't really helping our performance very much. So I think that the problem is whether or not it's going to help our performance. The scattered debris is really giving us the panel debris. The physical panel debris is really giving us a lot of issue. So what we're going to want to do is just put a thumbtack in this. Do more testing on LOD stuff for particles at range. Just so I don't forget that. For now, however, I think we're going to go ahead and just comment out this set of calculations. Yeah, that popping is obnoxious. It's something on the ship. Because if I take the ship out of it, then that popping doesn't happen. But of course, if I take the ship out of it, then our frames pop right back up because the ship is a huge load. Because it's like the whole ship, right? Crash. Let's go ahead and hide the ship. You can see our load really dropped. Let's see if we've got any frame popping. I mean, any shadow popping now. Yeah, something on the ship is causing the shadow popping. It's probably a material that I forgot to fix. Maybe on one of the struts or something. Because the... oh, that was actually what I forgot to write down. Let's go ahead and write it down. Investigate shadow popping. Let's go ahead and do a little bit of shadow popping investigation right now. We can do that by turning the ship back on, but hiding everything except for the pieces that we're going to actually be adjusting. So we're going to hide all of these. And that guy. That's probably the guy. So now we're only showing the 6 objects that are getting replaced by our hand-picked prefabs. It looks like it's already wrong. I think I can see that we are already going to get shadow popping. Oh, maybe not. Just got a little bit sad. You know, too fast off the draw on that. Assuming the worst. But our FPS is still really terrible. So it's really these guys that are causing the FPS drop, and it's just the number of particle systems that we've got. If I can get the particle systems under control and slightly more optimized, we shouldn't have any problems. And that's pretty much what I was planning on doing. I need to just optimize some elements here. The biggest element that I could really use to optimize is turning all of these into systems where these are all virtual instead of game objects. Now, in order to do that, I've got to do a lot of rewriting, and I'm not actually sure that I want to do that on camera. Maybe I should, just so that people can see how I do it, but it's even more boring than what I'm doing right now, and what I'm doing right now has driven away everybody. So, you know. But as you can see, if I take out those game object panels, our FPSs are quite nice. We don't have any problems at this point. So it's clear that those panels are the biggest load in this particular setup. We're not a steady 60 though. We're still dropping. But we're above 30 constantly. And it just feels so good. Let's go ahead and take a screen capture, just so that we can have some fun with it. That should be something we can finish up with. I need to cook my dinner. I didn't have any lunch, so I'm having a really early dinner. But if I don't get cooking real soon here, I'm going to be super hungry by the time it's time to eat it. One Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi, 4 Mississippi, 5 Mississippi, 6 Mississippi, 7 Mississippi. I guess it's... We'll just let that process for a while. Okay, well, I think I'm going to finish up here for today. I will come back to this on Wednesday. There's lots and lots of stuff I want to do. Both here and elsewhere. I was thinking about making a ZBrush intro, because I have had such a hard time getting used to ZBrush until I finally figured out what the paradigm is, and didn't see any tutorials on the fact that their paradigm is so weird, so maybe I'll make one. Anyhow, see you around, everybody. Later.